All right, welcome in. It is the Breer Report for November the 26th. We are one day shy of Thanksgiving and a great Thanksgiving Day slate to come. We got the Packers and the Lions at 1 o'clock. In the 4 o'clock hour, the Cowboys and Chiefs will kick off. And then we get the return of Joe Burrow in the nightcap. That'll be the Bengals visiting the Ravens in Baltimore. But as always, here it's the middle of the week. We do have a video mailbag for you. No print mailbag this week because of the Thanksgiving Day schedule. We will make up for it here. I could also maybe answer some of your questions a little bit later in the week on Twitter. We'll see if we can make that happen. But right now, I do want to answer 3 questions, as we always do here on the video mailbag. My first question is coming from Joey Bag of Donuts. That's at Joey Bag of, that's OV Donuts. Does Mike Tomlin have Andy Reid syndrome? Good coach, but is clearly not working with the Steelers and he needs to go somewhere else. It's unbelievable when you really think about how long Mike Tomlin has been there. He has now been in Pittsburgh for 5 years longer than his predecessor, Bill Cowher, was there. This is his 19th season. 2026 would make 20 seasons. So that longevity should not be sneezed at. That is an impressive run for any coach to make it that long. And you have to win a lot, and he has won a lot to make it that far. He still hasn't had a losing season. I know that's been something people have poked at because they haven't had as much playoff success lately. But certainly, I think you got to give a lot of respect to Mike Tomlin for the job that he's done. That said, they are getting older in a lot of key spots. And you'll see where I'm going with this. But Aaron Rodgers obviously is now in his 40s. They do not have his successor on board right now, unless you really think a lot of Will Howard. And I do think a lot of Will Howard, but I don't think you'd look at him and say, like, let's go forward with him as the quarterback. DK Metcalf is an older 28-year-old. He's a little bit beat up. On the defensive side of the ball, obviously, you've got a lot of age and guys like TJ Watt and Darius Slay and Jalen Ramsey. So you're relying on older players. Cam Hayward, the very end of his career. You're relying on a lot of older players. And so that means whether it's this year, at the end of this year, at the end of next year, a pretty serious and substantial reset is coming. And that becomes a natural point for the Steelers, for Mike Tomlin to reassess everything. So whenever that comes, whenever it's time for Aaron Rodgers to say goodbye, most people assume it'll be at the end of this year. Whenever it comes time to say goodbye to TJ Watt or Cam Hayward or any of the litany of proud veterans they have on their roster, bigger picture questions will come up. And the biggest one is, Mike Tomlin, do you want to go through a rebuild? Mike Tomlin, do you want to be here for a process that could take 3 or 4 years? How are we looking right now with the revamped front office? Obviously, it's a different front office than the one that Mike Tomlin came into when Kevin Colbert was the GM. Now you got Omar Khan as the GM, Andy Weidel as the head of scouting. How do you look at that if you're the Roonies? And I think it is going to take having some real hard discussions on where they're at, on where Mike Tomlin's at, on how everyone feels about the position that they're in. Look, there's no question that if Mike Tomlin became available, he would not last very long in the coaching market. Somebody would swoop in and snap him up. So this isn't about his value as a coach. It's about the situation that everybody's in. And you are right to bring up Philadelphia as a good example of two sides being in a place where maybe they were better off working apart. And so Andy Reid leaves Philadelphia after the 2012 season. And I was there a lot during the 11 and 12 seasons and saw how that thing had started to circle a drain. It was a much, much, much more severe decline than we've seen in Pittsburgh, where that thing fell off a cliff at the very end. It was awkward. It was weird. And as much as everybody in that organization respected Andy Reid, as much as Howie Roseman loves Andy Reid, as much as Jeffrey Lurie thought of Andy Reid, the time had simply come for everyone to move on. And it was so abundantly clear. And that's why I would never revisit that and say the Eagles made a mistake. It was just time for everyone. So Andy Reid takes a step back, says, okay, I want to have this set up differently. In Philly, he was the king of everything. He ran the entire thing. Goes to Kansas City, hires a general manager and John Dorsey that he feels like he can trust so he can go and focus more on being a coach. He has won 3 Super Bowls and been to 5 since. He's been in Kansas City now for almost as long as he was in Philadelphia. He was in Philadelphia for 15 years. This is his 13th year in Kansas City. So he's been there for almost as long as he was in Philly, which I think is a sign of how well the split went for him, how he made the right decision how even if it had been his decision, the right decision might have been for him to move on at the time. And then let's look at the Eagles, okay? Chip Kelly comes in. Chip Kelly modernizes a lot of things in their building. No, it didn't work out in the end, but they accomplished a lot of good things there over his 3 years. 10 wins, fall off a cliff in 2015. Now you go and get Doug Peterson. You win a Super Bowl with Doug Peterson. You've got a system established. The breakup with Doug Peterson comes after the 2020 season. And now you've been to 2 Super Bowls and won one with Nick Sirianni. So for both sides, it worked out because it was just time, because everybody had got to the point where they would be better off apart. I'm not saying that's where the Steelers or Tomlin are, but I think when you do get to the point where you're going through a more extensive rebuild, when you are looking at moving on from older players, when you do want to get younger across the board and you are going to go through a full reset, the entire vision of the operation that you have becomes paramount. And are Tomlin and Khan and Rooney in a place where they can share a vision for another 10 years, another 15 years? I think that that's the operative question here. And again, like whenever that time comes, I'd expect that they would have that conversation, because you've got a veteran head coach who's the ultimate professional, Mike Tomlin, and then you've got, one of the most well-run organizations in the history of pro football on the other side of the table. Question number 2 is from Mike Madden. That's at Mike_Madden. People are selling stock on Bryce Young, Kyler Murray, and Tua Tagovailoa, but are the Jags in quarterback trouble? They're winning some games, but not because of Trevor. I would agree with this. Trevor Lawrence does not look great in Liam Cohen's offense to this point. They've won really on the strength of their running game, on an opportunistic defense that's been able to create turnovers, on complementary football. So do we know now what Trevor Lawrence is? And I think that that is the main thing you have to ask here. All right. So Trevor Lawrence obviously has had a little bit of a different indoctrination into the NFL. He came in with Urban Meyer as his first head coach. We all know how poorly that went. 2021 was basically a wasted year in the development of Trevor Lawrence. Then Doug Peterson comes in. They have this huge bounce in Trevor Lawrence's second year. It looks like Trevor Lawrence now is going to ascend and become a top 7 or 8 quarterback in the NFL for the foreseeable future. Then that tapers off. And by the end, that didn't look great. And some of that was the personnel around him. And now Liam Cohen comes in, a guy who was able to get a great level of play out of Baker Mayfield. Now Baker had already bounced back, but got a great level of play out of Baker Mayfield in 2024. Spent a lot of time around Matthew Stafford in Los Angeles. And your question becomes, okay, can he turn Trevor Lawrence around? And do we have the hard answer yet on who Trevor Lawrence is? I still think they give it another year. They've made such a deep investment in him. And I don't think that they're at a point where the Cardinals with Kyler or the Dolphins with Tua, depending on who's leading those operations, they might look at it after this year and say, we only have 1 year of guaranteed money left. The time to cut bait is now. He can go be somebody else's bridge quarterback. Maybe we eat some of the money to facilitate a trade and we move on. I don't think that's where the Jaguars are yet with Trevor. Trevor, again, will be going into his 6th year in 2026. That's where Tua is right now. So I think you give him at least another year. You see how that plays out. And, whether or not Trevor's going to be the long-term answer, I don't know. Certainly he hasn't lived up to the expectations a lot of people, myself included, had for him going all the way back to when he was a freshman at Clemson in 2018 and won the national title. So I still think it's TBD as far as what Trevor is as a player. If I'm the Jaguars, I'm going to give this at least one more year, though. I'm not going back into the quarterback wilderness quite yet. All right, question number 3. This is from Joe Tucio. That's at Joe Tucio. Will the NFL ever look at the refs and possibly revamping it for the future? It's normal to miss a call once in a while, but they are now taking over games with bad penalties every week. Joe, thank you for asking this question. I want to make sure that I'm clear here. I don't blame the officials themselves completely. I think there is a fundamental problem in the way that officiating has been tweaked and changed over the last 10 to 15 years. And I think with the advent of a lot of new technology, and then I'd say, rise in importance of the competition committee, what we're seeing is the competition committee, I think, is doing too much as far as points of emphasis and rules changes from year to year. I think a huge part of that is the entertainment product and how the owners have the competition committee under their thumb and wanting to improve the entertainment product on a year-to-year basis. So you see more and more rules, more and more points of emphasis every single year. Then I think when you add that, like, to the fact that you have all this new technology and you have 70 angles that you can see everything at from in crystal clear high definition, you're talking about a game that was already very difficult to officiate. If you've ever been at the ground level of an NFL game, if you've ever been on the field, I have no idea how coaches or officials make heads or tails of any of it. Everything is moving so fast, it's a blur. At field level, it's very difficult to really see things as fast as they're moving. And so officials have to train themselves to look for things. They have to train themselves to see things. It's not the same as having a television screen there. So you have those guys who are already in that position where they have to decipher all this all this stuff moving at warp speed from field level, and they're training themselves to see things. And now you're giving them 15 different rules changes every year, points of emphasis every year. And so now they've got to incorporate that to how they've already trained their eyes to look at it. And now you have Big Brother up top where the cameras are watching. And you have a league that is so concerned about not having to come in on Monday and turn on the talk shows and have the officiating getting ripped from pillar to post. So, like, I think we've gotten to a point now where it's like the officials have a game that's already difficult to officiate. You've tangled it up with all of these different rules, changed it, and made it even more difficult to officiate. And now you have everybody getting to see it from more angles in a clearer picture than they've ever been able to see it before, which is great for all of us, but just makes it even more difficult on the officials. And I kind of think about this the same way I would look at a coach building an offense, right? So on a year-to-year basis, a coach wants to add stuff to his offense, right? So there are new ideas, new concepts you kind of work through and go through, and I like this and I don't like this, and like we're going to work on this and we're going to add this and we're going to subtract that, right? What you don't want to do is you don't want to keep adding to your offense and get to the point where it becomes too complicated for anybody to execute their jobs. I effectively think that's what's happened in the NFL with officiating, where you've made these things so complicated, it's making it so difficult on the officials. To me, it's like it was the wrong way to use the technology. The way to use the technology isn't to just keep piling stuff on. The right way to use the technology would be to take a look at how we can do everything more efficiently. To me, at this point, the technology has made things less efficient, not more efficient. So that's why I'd advocate for looking at this officiating in general and tearing it down to the studs and saying, what can we do to make this more efficient in general? And what can we do to make this easier on the officials, not harder on the officials? And I think a big part of the answer is putting somebody in the stadium, in the booth, I don't care how much it costs, and having that person as another member of the officiating crew who has real power as the sky judge. I think there's ways that you can make the game easier to officiate on field level. The communication, I think, between the officials on the field and officials off the field can get better. There are so many ways that they can make this better. And I think they've just generally made it worse. And part of it is PR. Part of it is they're worried about how they're perceived. Part of it is the business of it, which is the entertainment product. There's a player safety element as well. Make the officials' jobs easier, not harder. That would be, to me, the bottom line when you're looking at what you want to do with officiating. And I think to do that, you got to tear the thing down to the studs and rebuild it. And maybe it takes a couple off seasons to do it, but I think in the end, it would be worth it. Again, appreciate you guys coming out. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. I'm thankful for you guys coming out and asking all of your questions and all the comments that you've left for us. Again, you can leave comments down below. We love to see them on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube pages, and you can get to me on social media at Albert Breer on Twitter, at Albert R. Breer on Facebook, at Albert_Breer on Instagram. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Enjoy the games on Thursday, and we will be right back here on Friday.